announced on Monday and last time, we are going to share with you and basically cover the questions about demand generation for long sales cycles. Quite complicated topic for every B2B company that is selling to enterprise, and there are a lot of associated challenges when it comes to it, right? So lack of patience on the leadership level, lack of proper measurement, and hence lack of proper support. So lack of appropriate sales playbooks to maintain the nurturing process during the buyer journey. So we have collected a lot of your questions, and by the way, thanks everybody for sharing them. It helped us to create a nice deck. Usually we run these episodes without deck, but today we thought it could be a good idea to share with you a few things and also basically visually share with you examples to cover your questions. That being said, let us know, please, guys, where you all join us from. Type in the chat, please. Again, we are broadcasting from finally sunny Spain.
Yes, finally.
After weeks of rain. Nick from South Africa, good to see you. And Esther, good to see you as well.
Joseph from Wales. I see 𝗪𝗵𝗁,
our neighbor, good to see you.
Yes.
Yeah, let us know, guys, where you're all joining us from. And basically, meanwhile, Tarragona, give me back sun. We stole the.
James, how are you? Good to see you.
Awesome, James. Good to see you. Cool. So today we want to cover a couple of questions, right? So first of all, do the reality check on the current state of enterprise buyer journey and how long realistically is the buyer journey. That's the first part. The second one, we want to talk about demand generation from buyer's perspective. We invested a lot of time interviewing our buyers as well, asking how do they buy, right? And basically, how do they evaluate vendors? How do they even learn, because the buying process starts way earlier before the business trigger occurs. And ultimately, there were a few great questions on how to shorten the sales cycle for enterprise deals. So basically, this is our agenda for today. And just to kick it off, I think we can start with interesting report that was produced by Pavilion and Trust Radios last year. So I'll pass mic to you, Vlad, to cover this quickly.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So this was an amazing report that was created, like Andre mentioned, by Pavilion, which is a big community of GTM leaders, sales marketing leaders, and executives. And they partnered up with Trust Radius, and I don't know how many they interviewed and surveyed a lot of B2B buyers, asking them how they buy products. And what we have learned is very interesting. I think some of these things might not come as a surprise, as some of them might. The first one is that buyers shortlist products. We all know that. I've seen actually different reports. This says shortlist 2 to 3 products. I've seen recently from 𝗵𝗵𝗁 running some winter surveys as well, a little bit larger number, 5 to 8 products. But I don't think that is necessarily important for us. I guess depending on how you define the shortlist, it may be shorter or longer. But what is very, very interesting is that buyers select the product that was their first choice, maybe not surprise, but the one that is maybe more surprising is that 78% of buyers, and this is actually 86% of enterprise buyers, have learned about the product or have discovered the product that they end up buying before starting their research. So let that sink in. So they spend a lot of time not buying, and then they go into a buying process, they do their research, but the majority of them will at least shortlist or buy a product they discovered before they starting a process. What does it mean? It means, on the one hand, that they want to work with the vendors that they know. It also means that the awareness creation has to happen also outside of the buying process, which has a big impact on demand generation. We'll dive into that in a moment. And another one, which I don't think it's surprising, but it's important to know, and we see that every day, that a lot of companies are kind of missing this, that the majority of buyers, 56%, especially enterprise buyers, 71%, are prefer to talk to a product user before purchasing, whether that's somebody from their network, their former colleagues, somebody, their peer, industry peer, or a colleague from their network who they know. They want to check with them, people who they trust, much more than they will trust the vendors. So I think this is all very important to understand. I think there were some other findings about the size of the buying committee, which is growing. Don't remember the exact numbers that I mentioned, but I believe it was somewhere around 10 buyers at the moment of the research on average for large deal sizes. So this all indicates, I think, that they are conservative, especially enterprise buyers. They like to work and hire or buy from vendors that they know, trust, and like. How is that trust built? That trust and this knowledge, this brand awareness, let's say, is built before the buying process, and it's very much influenced by the people in their network, people that they trust. This is their go-to for discovery, rather than Google, rather than ads, and a lot of things that we might focus on as B2B companies. So this is definitely an interesting piece of research. And I think it's interesting to kind of contrast these insights with the way that a lot of B2B companies actually market and try to generate demand generation. So, and try to generate demand.
If you don't mind, I just wanted to ask our community, because we have quite a lot of people with us listening to us live. Do you guys, I wanted to ask you if any of these insights resonate with you. If you were a B2B buyer, would you say that, for example, you have heard of the product that you have purchased before doing the research, or that you usually shortlist 2-3 vendors before reaching out to them? Just curious to hear your thoughts. Type plus whatever yes. Curious to see with how many people this will resonate. Let us know in the chat. And while you're typing, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that just in 2 weeks, we are going to launch our 6th annual virtual Fullfunnel Summit. So if you didn't grab a free ticket, the link is in the chat. So that would be, again, our huge, massive annual event. Would be great to see all of you. Coming back to our collateral, to what Vlad said, this is really interesting. From our observation, we have seen a couple of times, maybe in most cases, when we speak to B2B companies and ask them about demand generation, almost everybody says, of course we do demand generation. Like, of course we do. The fun starts when you start diving deeper, right? When you start reviewing the playbooks. And in most cases, these playbooks are pretty linear and pretty naive, in a sense that we believe that they create the demand, right? So back to maybe 10 years ago, we all were learning from HubSpot about inbound marketing. Everybody was playing the SEO blog, right, game, just creating content around a bunch of specific keywords to capture that search intent, and basically expecting that these people will visit our website, book a demo, or request a trial, or ask to connect them with a subject matter expert, whatever, right? This is how the awareness was created. The second playbook that companies typically describe. They say, of course, we share thought leadership content. Just go and visit our LinkedIn page. We publish our PDFs, or we publish the pictures from the recently attended conference. And we also share like a link to our blog all the time saying, hey, we published the best new article in the world. So here's the link, go and read it on our blog. The problem, though, that nobody talks about the results, right? What are the actual, what is the actual impact on the pipeline generation, on account engagement, on account awareness? That's the first thing. The second one is the typical demand generation playbook, right? So I would love to ask you to share, because you have been involved in many of those conversations about the kind of typical demand gen playbook.
Absolutely. So the demand generation in a lot of cases is kind of demand capture, really. And what we mean by demand capture, it's trying to capture the existing demand, and that makes total sense. For example, when you look at high intent channels such as Google search, or directories such as 𝗪𝗵𝗿 or G2, for example. So promoting your solutions on those channels where the buyers are actually searching for solutions, although we see that a lot of B2B companies are kind of even giving up on those, giving up on Google, at least reducing the budgets that they're spending there, because the cost of acquisition is getting high. They're not getting, let's say, the targeted high value accounts captured in that way, but it's still definitely a valid strategy, right? But they also try to use the same kind of playbook on other channels which are not high intent. So let's say on LinkedIn, running ads, trying to at least, let's say promote the demo, or sending basically people to a landing page, which is very often, unfortunately, kind of a squeeze page that only gives very little information about the product, and trying to drive everybody who visits that page to book a demo. Of course, the buyers want to learn, and we should give them the opportunity to learn. There is no intent, for the majority of people are not logging on LinkedIn because they're searching for product. They're logging on because they want to connect, they want to learn about what's happening in their industry, etc. And then obviously, like, other than that, cold email, cold calling. And we know that a lot of companies are complaining that their outbound pipeline is in big decline, especially the last 2 years. Now there is even more noise with AI, and we know that a lot of sales directors that we spoke to say that, you know, their buyers receive just so much outreach that it doesn't even matter how good or how well personalized the messages are, if they just receive so much that they only read the messages from people that they know. So going back to that brand awareness, how important that is. Anyhow, so this is one way. So kind of trying to capture the existing demand, trying to kind of plaster the internet with ads about the product, sending people potentially either to a landing page to book a demo, or trying to do this directly via direct outreach. But on the other side, there is some intent to generate demand through education. What do I mean by that? A lot of companies will run, marketing teams will run PDF or gated content such as ebooks or white papers, again, very frequently on LinkedIn, will capture the leads and either immediately send them to sales, or put them in some sort of a nurture sequence, which is usually kind of 3, 4, 5 emails, mainly talking about the product. So again, we're assuming intent. The intent at that stage was essentially, if somebody has downloaded a piece of hopefully educational content, they wanted to learn. They didn't want to get pitched and then followed around the internet with a call to demo to discover your product. We know that doesn't work. Usually this leads to situations such as with one of our clients where we saw 16,000 MQLs, and then very, very few of them only converting into sales qualified opportunities. And then you can even question the attribution, but that's another story. And then webinars are another thing, that webinars, events, but unfortunately, a lot of those webinars are masking as educational, but really are kind of thinly veiled product pitches, masking as educational webinars. Or maybe sometimes there are educational webinars, but again, when that's the case, immediately following up with every attendee of the webinar, which is what a lot of companies do, is again assuming that buying intent where there is no buying intent. So if you compare the way that a lot of companies are actually running their, let's say, B2B demand generation playbook versus the way that the buyers are buying, you see a big discrepancy. And there is no wonder why we repeatedly hear that both the inbound and outbound pipeline are in big decline, that the cost of acquisition is just getting higher, and a lot of companies just basically realizing, okay, this playbook is essentially broken. So let's try to understand why it is broken, like what's actually happening, how does the demand generation work, or how does it look like from the buyer side? What's happening on the buyer side that makes this playbook ineffective?
Yeah, we're talking about masking webinars as like educational, but in reality they are the product pitches, and I just wanted to say it's a pitch time, but yeah, you interrupted me.
Oh yes, let's pitch.
Yeah, let's pitch everybody now. But jokes aside, quick question. How many touch points do you guys think any B2B company should at least make or execute with the enterprise target accounts to generate a sales opportunity? How many touch points across the entire buyer journey? Type in the chat your best guesstimate. 50 plus, Juan Pablo. Who else? Arita, 50 plus. 8, Aaron. Okay, so 50 plus and 8, quite big difference.
15.
Marcos, 15. How many? Patrick, 86, or maybe it was 68, I don't know. Kate, 50 plus, Nicholas, 15 plus. Cool. So it seems that nobody was even close to the recent report produced by HockeyStack. So they partnered with the guys from Cognizant, and they analyzed 50 enterprise closed won deals, right, across the, and as you know, HockeyStack, or maybe if you don't know, I will quickly explain. HockeyStack is end-to-end digital analytics software. So basically that captures all visible, let's say, touch points with the target account, right? Obviously, there are a lot of invisible touch points that no software will cover. So they have calculated the entire journey of these enterprise deals, and basically, from their stats, it takes you more than 200 touch points, right, to from the first impression until closed won to generate a sales opportunity, right, and more than like 2,500 impressions. And when we mean touch points, obviously we don't refer to sales check-ins. Hey, I just wanted to check in and follow up. And obviously, we are not referring to infamous sequences / cadences, right? 21 or whatever. And we're obviously not referring to automated email nurturing sequences where marketing begs to book a demo, right? Obviously, these are not meaningful touch points, are not value-added touch points. These are purely lead generation playbooks that don't work, right? So in reality, this refers to educational content, to retargeting ads that produce some value or case studies. This refers to educational emails from sales, to meaningful, one-on-one chats, invites to the webinars or in-person events, etc. Right? So out of curiosity, we once measured this with Vlad, in our software. So we took, I mean, we did it a year ago. We don't measure it now, because after this, we interviewed several enterprise buyers about their buyer journey, and we have outlined the entire guide. So for everybody who might be interested, maybe if you can find a link and drop in the chat, that would be helpful. But here is the short story, right? In our case, we were able to identify 87 touch points and 1 year of nurturing. And in our case, we know that these are all value-added touch points. Why? Because we don't have outbound, and we don't also run retargeting ads or product pitching ads, and we don't send any, I wanted to check in follow-ups, not doing any of these touch points, right? So these were purely, let's say, nurturing touch points for this account. And here's the interesting story, right? If you look at May 2023, so what usually, March 2023, what usually happens at this time? Our Fullfunnel Summit that we just announced and shared the link with you. So this company came completely unaware of our company, right? It came out of network, out of recommendation, whatever, right? Then there were no other touch points, but they signed up for our newsletter and they were engaging with our content, right? And you can see one of the website visits that the software was able to capture in July 2023. Then apparently in September, where it's the period when a lot of companies realize that they are missing their revenue targets and they start planning next year, this is where you see the engagement happens, right? A lot of conversations. So they were coming to our website, checking all of our case studies that are published on the website, a lot of meaningful engagement, signing up for the events, webinars, etc. And then the actual opportunity was generated in March 2024, right? When the company was able finally to prioritize the account-based marketing initiatives, and they reached out to us, right? So in reality, this is, and obviously, we're kind of, I would say we don't have maybe the longest sales cycles, but quite long, because consulting, this is not the, let's say, this is not the Netflix subscription, right, that people buy after clicking an ad or email. But there are a lot of companies that have even longer sales cycles. And before we'll dive deeper, I think what we need to explain is what actually extends the sales cycles, what actually makes the sales cycles longer. So I would again ask you to quickly share this.
Absolutely. And there is obviously a lot of the buying process that is beyond our influence, and usually the companies will simply live with the status quo until as long as they can afford it. Companies usually react or start their buying process once they encounter, let's say, challenges to their high priority business objectives, challenges that they are costly enough, or the cost of inaction is high enough for them to not be able to ignore it or postpone it. So let's just first get it out of the I think question, because it's important to understand that there are some things that we can influence and some things that we cannot influence. But even when the buyers start researching and start discovering, contacting the vendors, there are a number of things that we can influence as B2B companies that prolong this cycle and make it actually also frustrating. I read somewhere that something like more than 70% of B2B buyers are frustrated by the discovery process, thanks to the vendors. So the first reason is that there are a lot of friction points. And by friction points, what we mean is, you want to go to a, let's say, website of your vendor, you want to understand what they're doing. You go there, you first have to click away the banner promoting something or the chat that is popping up there so that you can actually start reading about the product. But then you get kind of a vague overly benefit-driven copy that doesn't really tell you exactly what the product does. So it's kind of also frustrating to wade through that marketing fluff that doesn't really give you the information. Then maybe, you know, you might want to try that chat out to see whether it will give you meaningful information, but you realize it's just kind of a bait to get you to book a meeting. And once you decide, based on maybe other research that you have done, to book the meeting, you encounter additional friction points, such as, you know, not being able to book the meeting immediately, but just submitting the form and then having to wait for somebody to reach out to you to book the meeting with you. Then booking the meeting with, let's say, a junior SDR that doesn't really have the knowledge to answer your questions that you have about the product, is kind of not allowed to share the pricing or other kind of information that you need to make your decision, to evaluate. So they ask you a bunch of quote unquote qualification, band or whatever questions, only to pass you on to an account executive, quote unquote the product specialist, who then again asks you a bunch of questions before finally giving you that information. There is a lot of friction point in that process. Another big friction point is low brand awareness. And we mentioned at the beginning, what was it, 86% of enterprise buyers actually discover products before they start the buying process. So a lot of brands, as we saw, don't really do anything to generate that brand awareness, don't produce thought leadership or other type of content that will engage buyers that are currently not buying to create that awareness. So you end up being aware of, let's say, category leaders or, you know, brands that you might discover through your network. Lack of brand awareness also will impact not only the discovery, but also the win rates. A lot of salespeople that we know are complaining about losing out on brand, which is to say, because there is not enough recognition, especially in enterprise, they're risk averse. They need to protect their social capital within that enterprise. So they're, as they say, nobody got fired for hiring IBM. So it's basically that idea of, okay, if we go for kind of a well-known brand, we are taking less risk. So that awareness is also going to impact the win rates of the salespeople, of the sales team. Then during the process of the sales discovery and you know, as your salespeople are starting to get to know the buying committee and their needs and trying to work on that opportunity, a lot of time there is a missed opportunity. There is a lack of buyer enablement. There is lack of information that will help, that is very specific to the questions that I have as a buyer, to the problems and the challenges that I face as a buyer, to the, you know, me maybe as a champion who is trying to champion your solution internally, because at the end, it's not really you or your salespeople who sell. As 𝗪𝗵𝘁 says, it is the champions who sell your product internally. So you need to arm them with the knowledge and buyer enablement content, as we call it, to be able to do that, which would include business case, for example, very specific business case that they can use to defend this internally, showing clearly the cost of inaction and the ROI and the total cost of ownership of the product, and understanding what it takes to implementing, and understanding whether we are ready as a buyer to actually implement that, understanding the change management that is required, etc., etc., etc. So this is the other piece that is very frequently missing, which again makes the process more frustrating and creates all these frictions, because you as a champion are trying to answer that questions, you have limited information, you're not being proactively served that information, which makes it more difficult for you to buy. And then I mentioned this already, unqualified sales reps. This is such a big deal that you know, a lot of companies, I think this is changing a lot, but as a result of the predictive analytics being so popular at a certain moment, a lot of companies were kind of hiring a bunch of young junior SDRs, not giving them proper training about the product, not basically educating them so that they are able to have a conversation with the buyers and provide the information that the buyers need and ask the right questions to uncover the information that they need to create the business case, to create, to help the champion sell internally. So a lot of things that we can control as brands, a lot of things that we cannot control. Okay, we can't control them, but the things that we can control, definitely a lot of opportunity to also help speed up that buying process or sales cycle, and shorten the sales cycle, in fact, by doing those things. So with that out of the mind, I think it makes sense to have a look at how is actually demand created, how can we think about demand creation from the buyer's perspective, and then how can we then actually remove these friction points, make the long cycle shorter by providing the right way of demand generation. So you want to go for that?
Before I'll touch on this, I would love to quickly remind again about this this deal that we once analyzed, right? So as you can see, the majority of touch points happened at the end of the buyer journey, right? When the buyer became active, when they became prioritizing a vendor, right? And reaching out to this vendor. But if you look at the early stages of this buyer journey, there were not so many visible touch points and interactions, right? And before we'll share with you, I know everybody is super interested in specific tactics or activities. I believe that it makes sense to discuss the fundamental principles of demand generation for different for long sales cycles, right? So first of all, we need to realize and accept the fact that there are different levels of demand, right, at different stages of the buyer journey. When the buyer journey is on its early stage, there is no buying intent at all, or it could be very low, right? And if we look at all the playbooks that we have discussed so far, maybe again, I would just quickly pull these playbooks, right? They are very far from satisfying the needs of the buyer at this stage, right? These activities, they are all related to like so-called demand capture and promoting the product in any possible way to be able to book a demo, right? But in reality, again, as we look at this buyer journey, there is no buying intent at all. So what should we do with these accounts, right? We need to adjust our call to actions to that level of demand, right? So it could be for making sure that they start following you, they sign up for your newsletter, events, etc. Why? Because you want to maximize the value-added touch points. Again, let's come back to this research, right? How many touch points do we need, value-added touch points do we need to have to create enterprise sales opportunity, or to close, or to influence the enterprise deal from first impression to closed one, right? Obviously, this goes against, let's say, conventional demand gen practice that we run whatever gated PDF, generate MQL, and then sales will follow up and generate sales opportunity. No way, that doesn't work, right? And this is only like very linear and short transactional sequence of touch points, right? And what happens next? Nothing, right? A lot of, let's say, most of the teams that we are aware of, they just move to the next account. They simply forget this account and that's it, right? But in reality, our goal with the majority of that market is to maximize the value-added touch points, right? The more we will be able to influence this account, the better. And again, from the length perspective, more or less, we're obviously talking about what we observe with our business and with our clients, right? This stage could take 6 to 8 months, right? And then when accounts start prioritizing the challenges, right? Because actually the buying process starts only when the company had an internal consensus that there is a specific challenge that should be solved, right? Or there is a specific need or strategic initiative, and the teams are working on it, right? So this is where the kind of the buying process starts. So this is where the buyers start looking at different alternatives, at different potential solutions, right? They might be thinking, because often, especially whenever we are working with software companies, right, they often say, hey, so if they don't buy, when we ask about alternatives, they always say, yeah, if they won't buy our product, they are going to buy the competitor product. But this is not the solution, right? You talk only about one way to solve it with the software. And there could be multiple ways how your buyers could think about solving these issues. Hiring agencies, building internal tools, hiring consultants, figuring out different ways to solve it, right? Maybe not the way that your software enables them. And this is basically the stage where they have low to medium intent, right? And this is where they start looking at different vendors, start collecting the content, the different insights about different potential solutions to influence internal decision-making process, right? Which solution is more beneficial or is a better fit to the strategic initiative or challenge they have prioritized. And this is where you start seeing this whatever high intent pages, visits, right? This is where the content engagement might happen, event signups, etc., right? So, and only when this team, let's say the buying group, makes a decision about the solution, not the vendor, but about the solution, this is where they start evaluating vendors. And this is the shortest period of the buyer journey, which could be 1 to 3 months. And this is where the buying intent is really high, right? And this is where we need to capture it and work on sales opportunities generation. But can we do this without let's say, fulfilling the needs of fulfilling the demand levels at earlier buyer journey stages? The answer, unfortunately, it depends, because obviously if you sell $15 CRM, then you can capture the demand, you operate in commodity market, and then there is no problem. But then you shouldn't listen to this podcast at all. Just forget about everything that we were talking about, right? But if you sell enterprise product, right? If we're talking about 6-7 figure contracts, then unfortunately the answer is no. And you need to become a prioritized or shortlisted vendor, right? So what we did as well with Flood, we interviewed a couple of our customers to visualize the buyer journey, let's say the demand generation process from the buyer perspective, right? How they think about these levels of demand and what are their actual needs at all of these different stages. So Vlad, again, created a really cool infographic, so I would love to ask you to share it.
Thank you. So I think, again, this is the buyer's perspective, how they think or how the demand generation is perceived and looks like from their perspective. And why do we keep insisting on that? Because we need to align the way that we generate demand with that. So as we will share in a moment, the model that will help you do that. So from the buyer's perspective, the majority of time they spend dealing with the status quo. I'm a whatever HR or finance director in an organization, and I'm paid hopefully good money to deal with the challenges and the problems, right? The fact that I have that title, or maybe even the fact that I have that challenge, doesn't mean that I'm buying, right? So the default state, the majority of time, is I, as a professional, want to learn. I want to upskill myself. I want to learn about the best practices, about the industry trends. This is the demand that I have, the demand for knowledge, the demand for content that Andre explained. I might at that stage discover good content from a brand or people and start following them. I will probably use low intent tools or places, networks, to do that. Might be LinkedIn, YouTube, podcasts, might be specific conferences, events, etc., where I will go to discover that information. And importantly, a lot of people during today's webinar shared that in the chat. A lot of these touch points are not even measured. So one of those touch points that is frequently not measured are also the fact that sometimes I will, as a buyer, I will also share the content that I discover with my colleagues. And we have seen this many times anecdotally with our prospects when they mention, you know, I've been sharing your content with my colleagues for the last whatever X months. So this is something that definitely happens very frequently. So this is the default state. As I mentioned, it's only when something happens in the business that shifts my priority to a problem that is a threat to a high priority business objective. And when we know that this is an important problem, that the cost of doing nothing, if we don't do this, we will risk that high priority business objective. It's going to hurt us enough that we care. And it's not something that we can solve internally, because that's the first thing that we are going to try to do, is going to try to see if we can solve this internally, and we cannot postpone or ignore it. That's where we are at the stage of, hey, we are actually looking for a solution for this problem. Otherwise, we're just going to solve it, ignore it, or postpone it. And then we go and start discovering our solutions. As you saw, a lot of that discovery will have maybe already happened. So we might already have some brands on top of our mind. Remember, 86% of buyers will shortlist vendors they discovered before they started. So while they were in I want to learn stage, right? So they will start discovering solutions. And as Andre was explaining, I'm just at this stage trying to understand the different options. And I'm trying to see, okay, is your category, right? So is the kind of solution that you're selling a good fit for what we need? Is this the best option for us to solve the problem? It's only then that I start to kind of have that demand to have a solution like yours. And then hopefully during these first 3 stages, by the way, we still didn't start with the demand capture. So they're still not actively necessarily looking for exact solution like yours, right? Where a lot of companies only start their demand generation, that they will discover the majority of those solutions. And hopefully I'm shortlisting your solution. So this is one of the solutions that I'm considering, right? That's the best kind of, you can hope with the majority of your demand generation, that you end up top of mind, that you end up in that consideration step. Now, when do they actually start thinking that they want your solution? Well, after having identified, evaluated, and vetted the different vendors. It doesn't mean that they're talking to you. Maybe, probably they are starting to talk to you, and we believe you're the best option. And very importantly, I'm not buying alone, so I need to have consensus around it. I need to have consensus of my key stakeholders that this is indeed the option that we want to do. But that's not yet game over, because we still need to do a lot of things. We need to understand the total cost, the cost of ownership. And I'm not going to trust your ROI calculator, as I learned today from another great research from 𝗪𝗪. People don't trust them. They are kind of self-serving. They don't give you the facts. I'm going to do my own research to really understand the total cost of ownership of your solution, but also the ROI. Okay, it's not just the cost. I want to understand, okay, when can we start to see the ROI, and what will this ROI be? When can we start seeing the value? Very importantly, also, I need to know that I can implement this, that I have the, the plan, understand what it needs to happen. I have the people that I need to have with skills that I need to have, and infrastructure. So, by the way, when we spoke about buyer enablement, like, this is an important question that a lot of companies just don't answer. Like, what does it take? What are you going to do? What do I have to do? Do I have to do migrations and integrations? And how does it all look like? Or is this something that you will take care of, et cetera, et cetera? So, like, what will it take for me to actually implement this? How much change management will I have to do? Did we just implement like a big CRM migration and everybody's tired? And I know I can't just get my people through another big change. If that's what it takes to implement your solution, I might give up at that stage, even though that I went through all the other stages before. And of course, we will be getting a lot of questions from our decision makers and our colleagues about potential risks. We need to understand those risks. We need to know how to deal with them once we understand them. And of course, the fun part, the procurement department has to have vetted you. And the last year or two, the procurement has gotten a really much more important participation in the buying process, much bigger decision-making power as well. So a lot of the buying also is now in the hands of procurement, not just purely kind of checking you out as a vendor, going through the checklist, but actually actively participating in that. So with that out of the way, understanding what are the different and the actual complexity of this whole process, let's see actually how can we think about our own model. What do we need to do to align and help the buyers move through that process faster, but also increase the chance of ending up in the consideration set, but also ending up as a preferred vendor there. So Andre, maybe this is something you can address.
Time to get tactical, right? Obviously we could present this model in the beginning, but we felt that without all the context that we have shared, this model won't make as much sense as it will make for you right now. So this is how we look at it, right? And the first thing that I would love to pinpoint your attention is what do we have in the middle? It's the buying committee group, right? And typically in the buying committee, we have roles like champions, power users, partners, blockers, decision makers, and influencers, right? All of these people inside the buying committee group, we are not talking obviously about job titles, right? So these are the roles that they execute in the group. They might have different motivation to buy, first of all, to select a specific solution, and then to select a specific vendor. And my firm belief where most demand generation programs are falling down, demand gen teams, they pick up the traditional or their standard ICP and they say, hey, now we'll create demand gen for them, right? Demand gen program. And the ICP, you know, firmographics, it could be even defined they could even define the buying committee, etc. Here's the problem. If you have diversified buying committee members with different motivation and different reasons to buy, you need to select your primary role and create demand generation program for them. And I explicitly recall now the conversation we had last year with one of the companies that came to us, and they explained we are running very successful demand generation program for HR teams, and this is the software for kind of entire team portal, right? Where they could have all the kind of engagement with internal team members, company news, etc. All of that stuff. HRs fully buy in, but we can't sell it to IT teams. IT teams are blocking the deals because usually all of these enterprises, they are on Microsoft, and IT teams, they don't want to get out of Microsoft. They either claiming that they would hire a software development partner to work and create a similar portal, basically built on Microsoft, etc. And they raise a lot of concerns about third-party solutions, etc. So they are apparently huge blockers. Another example of the recent projects where we are working on, you might have, let's say, it's the software where you sell to supply chain, and then there is logistic department, and then there are customs departments, right? Completely different needs. And you need to understand that generic demand gen won't help to create demand across all the buying committee members. What does that mean for us? It means that we need to define the core roles and then figure out how can we create this, let's say, small scoped demand gen programs for each of the target buyer persona. And also to pre-address the question, what if we don't have big resources? Then you need to figure out who would be your primary buyer persona, right? You can't talk to CFOs the same way you'll be talking to IT people, and you won't be able to talk to IT people the same way as you are selling to champions, let's say, whatever it could be the role, HR, marketing, sales, doesn't really matter, right? So these people are located in the middle. And then your demand generation program should include activities that basically fulfill the demand levels, right? That we have discussed: demand for content, demand for solution, demand for a vendor, right? And also, as you can see, there are a lot of activities which will quickly describe to you. The key point is that you don't need all of them, right? In reality, for you to run a successful demand gen program, it would be more than enough to have 3 to 5 activities that satisfy each of these levels of demand, good distribution, and then good demand capture and process, right? This is how it works. So when it comes to demand for content, right, what are the best activities? Just just look at this episode, right? We invited you, our community, and we're not talking about any product, whatever, right? So this is where this is where we satisfy demand for the content. We don't talk about our business, we don't talk how great we are, about our case studies, whatever, right? We talk about the industry problems and how to solve it, right? This is the simple example. And this simple episode could be done in multiple, this episode, this content that we are sharing with you could be shared in multiple ways, right? That could become the newsletter. This could be the thought leadership content. We could put all of this, pieces of presentation into thought leadership posts and promote them on the channels where your target buyers are. Right, could be LinkedIn, Reddit, whatever. Sometimes, often, that a lot of buyers, they are not active on social, which means that you need to figure out other distribution channels, right? It could be communities, could be niche associations, etc. Or it could be even one-to-one distribution, right? So when you involve your sales team and they do this as one-on-one distribution, which is one of the best ways, basically, to maintain accounts nurturing, right? Then we have demand for solution activities. So this is where you start talking about basically you give them a good overview of how the problem could be solved. Obviously, you highlight the benefits of your solution, but in native way, right? You don't, again, comment, pitch, look how great, or you don't pretend that without your product, the problem can't be solved, right? In many cases, it can be. So this is where you start talking about specific jobs to be done, right? Again, that's why I mentioned that you always need to understand who is your primary buyer persona that you want to create demand generation for, right? Who do you want to nurture? This is the key, because then these jobs to be done would be completely different, right? That's the first thing. This is where you can leverage your case study, right? This is where you can talk about problem solution content, right? Different solution guides, etc. So talking about the use cases and typical challenges and what are kind of the wrong ways of solving these challenges, what are the right ways of solving these challenges, etc. Right? Also talking about why some solutions are not appropriate fit or could be the wrong fit. And lastly, you have demand for vendor, right? If you look from the, let's say, proportion perspective, I would say that the major part of your content should be created for this demand for content. While in reality, most companies, they focus only on this part, right? Demand for vendor. Talking about, basically, this is where we need to present our solution. We need to have good messaging. We need to have product overview or product tours, right? This is where we need to collect the good testimonials, user stories or customer stories, case studies, right? Provide clear price and at least price and estimate, etc. And what makes a good enterprise demand generation for long sales cycles? When you have all these 3 levels, right? When you satisfy all the 3 levels of demand. And the next step is the distribution, because distribution doesn't mean that you posted something on your corporate's, on your company's LinkedIn page and you expect that people will consume that content. In most cases, that will never happen, right? The team invests a lot of time into creating something and then nobody sees it, right? When it comes to distribution, there are 4 layers of activities. It could be organic distribution. For example, you know that we publish a lot of content on LinkedIn, right? This is the organic distribution. This podcast would be published on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. This is the organic distribution on these platforms, right? Then you have paid distribution. For example, when we know that this episode is, and we have heard already great feedback from you, so then we can use, when the feedback loop is in place, we know that this piece of content was valuable, right? We can launch the paid distribution to make sure that other target accounts and other target buyer personas would be consuming this piece of content. Then you must have one-to-one distribution. This is not non-negotiable. The best distribution channel are your sales reps, right? And you create content. Let's be honest. Why do we create the content? We want to influence the buyer journey, right? And who is the quick question? Who is in the trenches? Who talks to the prospects every single day? Sales reps. Now, here's the tricky part. And I know there are a few sales reps who are listening, who are with us live right now, so you guys might confirm this. Here's the tricky part. No sales rep will ever send a message or a mail with a crappy content. No sales rep will ever share the content that will kind of position himself or herself as amateur. And this is the litmus test for marketing, right? Whenever you produce any piece of content, whenever you plan any demand generation activity, you need to answer two questions, or basically tick two boxes. A, is my sales rep, or even better, VP of sales, will my VP of sales be willing to send this piece of content or promote this activity among our key accounts? And the second one, are we willing to spend money on boosting this piece of content, right? Basically, initiating the paid distribution. And if answer is no, then it's better not to do it. This is kind of the reality litmus test, right? And lastly, you have amplification audiences, as Vlad established or coined that term. So this could be your partners, this could be communities, this could be thought leaders, right? People who your audience follows and trust, right? Already, the trust is there. And that's why we observe a huge spike in, let's say, influencer marketing in B2B right now, because what has happened in the last, let's say, few months. So a lot of companies experience the drop in their organic Google traffic because the algorithm has changed. More buyers started to use AI to identify different vendors or to find different content, etc. Right? But what didn't change? That a lot of people still come to this, for example, podcast episodes like this one, or to the webinars, or to the conferences, etc. Still, a lot of B2B buyers are following industry micro thought leaders, right? And they trust them. So that's why you need to have activities that enable or allow you to co-create content with them. This is how the nurturing and distribution of your narrative happens, right? And all of these activities, they actually create the intent signals for you, not the buying intent. Because the only one way to identify buying intent is when a company reaches out to you and says, hey, I want to book your demo, or book a demo with you. This is the buying intent. All the rest are just the signals, not buying intent, definitely. So all these activities create these intent signals for you, and you need to capture them in two ways: inbound demand capture and outbound demand capture. So I would just pass mic to you, Vlad, and ask you to cover this. And before you start, quick question to you guys, because we have quite a lot of people with us right now. Are you guys? Would you guys be interested in the demand gen playbook? Because with Vlad, we recently were recording detailed overview of all of these activities that we basically recording all the activities that represent this model. Let us know in the chat, type plus or yes if you would be interested in this playbook. And Vlad, pass the microphone to you.
Thank you. So as Andre was explaining, a lot of the activities on the top of this graphic, demand for content, demand for solution, demand for vendor, all of these activities that he was explaining, including distribution, are going to help you generate demand. How do you know whether you're generating demand? Using the intent signals. And we can't make a lot of assumptions that these are necessarily the buying signals, but we can definitely use those signals in different ways to capture the demand. So the inbound demand capture is something that a lot of companies are doing. If you are creating demand for your product, your buyers are in the buying mode, they have discovered you through your demand generation, through recommendations from somebody else. Very frequently, only then they will actually Google your name instead of typing in your website.com, your name brand.com, they will Google it. And that's actually a lot of times this gets attributed to Google, this gets attributed to SEO or paid Google ads, where actually the buyers have discovered you in a different ways. But capturing that demand that has been generating using Google search is absolutely very valuable way for you to capture the demand. This includes, like I said, high intent channels includes Google search, it includes directories such as G2, 𝗪𝗵𝗿, other maybe 𝗪𝗲 if you're a service company. These are directories of directories of solutions like yours. You can also, some of them allow you to promote there, to kind of paid advertising on those. You can help by boosting reviews there, like incentivizing your customers to leave you a positive review on those websites, etc., etc. Promotion on those review websites and platforms, like I said, it's another intent channel. And retargeting. What does retargeting do? It allows you to translate some of these engagement signals, visits to your website, engagement with your LinkedIn ads. Let's say you've been promoting some demand for solution content or other type of content on LinkedIn, and now you can also retarget people who have been engaging with these other ads. You can retarget people who are visiting your website, etc., with more kind of product marketing ads and calls to action and social proof, etc. These are the kind of things that we would do within the inbound demand capture. So you're hoping that people will now be looking you up on Google, on these directories, or be kind of taking the action themselves to book the demo with you or whatever the next call to action is. All-bound demand capture is something that not a lot of companies do. What do we mean by all-bound? It's kind of a play of words combination between inbound and outbound. We're actually using this intent signal. So you have been doing all these activities, sharing that content to generate the demand. This is creating intent signals. But now you work with sales to enable them with these signals and playbooks so that they know how they can turn those signals into, our engagement signals and other signals, into conversation and try to capture the demand through those sales, one-on-one sales conversations. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, importantly, always, as we always say, align the level of demand with the next call to action. So if the signal is somebody attending your webinar and the webinar was educational, don't assume that they're looking to buy your product. But what you can do after a webinar could be offering more resources on the same topic, or maybe suggesting an expert session with one of your subject matter experts. In some cases, those can be account executives or other kinds of subject matter experts who can help have a meaningful discussion, maybe audit the process of the buyers, or give them other valuable insight, and of course also share, for example, case studies, share client stories, etc., and start a conversation about your solution. These are the so-called bridge activities that we often talk about. But if the level of engagement and the intent signals that you're capturing kind of lower level, maybe somebody just engaging with thought leadership content, the next logical step could be connecting with them and trying to start a conversation about the topic that they engaged with, maybe offering more information about it, maybe inviting them to an event, right? If somebody registered into an event, maybe the next logical action would be to connect with them and ask them what they're hoping to learn, what are the kind of challenges that they're hoping to learn, etc., etc. So all of these different examples that I shared of the activities, the key point there is being proactive as with the sales team, working together with the sales team, proactively being proactively going, reaching out to target customers based on the existing signals, based on their engagement, based on their interest. Very important, aligning the call to action or the activity with the signal or with the level of intent that you can infer from that signal, but also never stop nurturing. That is to say, we don't necessarily, we want to be proactive. We want to leave kind of the control in the hands of the buyer, whether they want to take us on the offer or not. However, we also have an opportunity to try to engage the same buyers that were engaged maybe in the past with other meaningful touch points. So maybe you will be running other interesting events in the future, or maybe you will have new interesting pieces of content that you can share with them. Maybe you will look up relevant industry news that you can share with them. We call those non-sales touches, which will help you kind of nurture in an old-bound fashion, nurture those buyers that have previously been engaged. And you never know when they will become ready, when maybe you will see more signals, etc. Maybe we'll pick up that thread, but this will actually allow you to help stay kind of on top of their mind, and so that they will be thinking of you, so that you increase the chance of ending up in their considerations set. So with that, we covered the model, and I see that Andre is sharing some questions. I think it's a good moment to start answering questions because we got a lot of them also during this live episode, but also people who were registering were sharing some questions. So do you want to address that one?
I think this is the best one to quickly cover, because it is aligned with what we just shared, right? Question from Archana: how do you balance the need for sustained engagement in a long sales cycle while ensuring that prospects don't experience content fatigue? Are there any specific formats or sequences strategies that work best? So first of all is that you should forget about sequences, in a sense that we're thinking about. If we think that we'll set up whatever, we have discussed that there are 87, in our case, 87 touch points. It doesn't mean that we need to send 87 emails across 87 weeks, right? The automated lead nurturing email sequence. This is what we were talking about the last time with Vlad. Obviously, no way, right? So you're not going to say to your CEO, hey, we are just on week 52. We need to wait 35 weeks more until we'll see the results. No. So the key point is that you create quota calendars, right? And basically, these calendars should, as I mentioned, they should include 3 to 5 activities aligned with these different levels of demand, right? Then, based on this, you start building your demand generation function. What might work for us doesn't mean that will work for other company, right? You need to understand the buyer persona, right? That's why I mentioned who is your primary buyer persona you want to run this demand generation for. Because let's say, again, yes, you want to sell to IT teams. chances are that these people are not active on LinkedIn, and your social content, whatever, thought leadership content on LinkedIn won't work at all, right? If you are selling to engineers working for manufacturing companies, like we have experienced that use case once, right? You won't be able to use any digital channels. So in this case, we did all our marketing through the niche associations, connecting with these people, and also hosting the in-person events. So this is the idea, right? You need to have these quarter calendars, and making sure that every quarter calendar contains activities that are aligned with the different levels of intent. So that's unfortunately the answer to a question. And the activities, they are purely dependent on the buyer persona. And I know Vlad will need to log off. So thank you so much for joining. I will very quickly touch the last slide, because we didn't discuss this, but I feel it would be essential to cover this, because there were questions from our community, and more specifically, if I'm correct, it was from Thomas about shortening the sales cycle. So there are a couple of things, right? Again, when we think about the buying cycle, right, when the demand for vendor happens, the problem is that a lot of teams, they think in a linear way. Again, we have whatever, right? We have the demo call, and then we need to share the proof of concept, then we send the proposal, and then we have kind of the negotiation or the legal part, and then the closed one, right? In reality, the buying process is completely different, and Vlad already shared this, right? How that looks like from the buyer perspective. So there could be, again, vendor evaluation in place. There could be a lot of internal conversations. If you're not talking to decision makers, if you're engaging with champions, right, they need to present a narrative or collateral to justify the investment in your product or in your service, right? This is basically what happens. And what does that mean? That means purely that you need to adjust your sales process to it, right? It doesn't mean that you hosted a discovery call, then you sent whatever, your like 42 slides deck and a bunch of case studies, and you expect that they would kind of convert, and then sales rep just sends follow-ups. Hey, I wanted to check in, I wanted to check in, I wanted to check in. Do you have any news, right? The reality is, if the buyers are not replying to you, then it means there are no news, and there is no news in place. So what does that mean? That means you need to understand the typical internal decision-making process, and the only way you can understand it is by interviewing your key accounts, right? Observe the patterns, ask as many details about the deals as possible, analyze who they add to email threads, right? What are the roles of these people? So then you can figure out who is actually involved into that buying process. And when you'll interview them about how they evaluated you, for example, your product, what were the critical questions, what were the meetings, what was the agenda of these meetings, right? Then you can map out the typical buying process and start thinking how you can actually influence it. How can you help your buyers to sell your product, right? Because in reality, what we call sales enablement should be called the buyer enablement, right? We don't need armor our sales reps. We need to armor our buyers, or our potential buyers, to be able to defend your offer and sell it internally. This is the key. So when you understand, you start adjusting basically your collateral and activities to the way how your customers are buying. And lastly, there was the question about the recording. Absolutely, yes, you can log in with the same link and basically rewatch this podcast episode, or if you prefer listening to the audio content, I will drop a link to our Spotify and iTunes channels where you can subscribe to our podcast. And while I'm dropping the link, quick question. Was this episode helpful? How did you like it? Share quick feedback in the chat, please. Curious to hear. Cool. Thank you, 𝗪𝗵𝘁. Thank you, Nicholas, Sharon, Kate. Appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys. And hopefully you all have signed up for our Fullfunnel Summit that we will host in a few weeks. So I know that 𝗪𝗵𝘁 will be there for sure. So our #1 engagement person on the summits. So jokes aside, looking forward to seeing you all in a few weeks. Next week, we'll host the final, let's say, episode before the summit. Stay tuned. On Monday, we'll announce the topic, and it would be complementary to what we have discussed today. We'll talk about the capturing these different intent and engagement signals and avoiding account blindness. Stay tuned. We'll announce it on Monday. And have a great rest of the week. Cheers.